No one remembered a time when the queen was not feared. For more than 1,000 years, Queen Ashariel sat upon the living throne of Varelia, ruling over stars, planets, and countless species. Her name alone was enough to silence runes. Her image was carved into monuments across the galaxy. To her people, she was eternal. To her enemies, she was death. And to everyone, she was untouchable. The grand hall was vast and cold, built from crystal that glowed softly like frozen moonlight. Tall pillars rose high into the air, carved with symbols older than history. Hundreds of guards stood perfectly still, their armor sharp and dark, their weapons humming with quiet power. They were trained to kill in less than a breath. At the center of the hall, the queen sat upon her throne. She did not move. She did not blink. Her silver crown floated above her head, connected to her mind and the ancient systems of the empire. Through it, she could feel wars, rebellions, and the shifting balance of power across the stars. Emotion had long ago been replaced by duty. That was how it had always been, until the human arrived. His name was Ethan Walker. He was not impressive. He was smaller than the guards, weaker than the nobles, and carried no weapon. His clothes were torn from travel and old battles. Dust clung to his boots. His face showed exhaustion, loss, and something deeper quiet. Determination. He stood alone. At the end of the hall, many alien eyes watched. Him with open hatred. A human does not belong here, one noble hissed. They are fragile, another whispered. Breakable. Ethan heard them, but he did not respond. He kept his eyes on the queen. This was the same ruler who had watched Earth burn from a distance. Years ago, when humanity begged the stars for help, it was Queen Ashariel who had chosen silence. Not cruelty, just indifference. Earth had survived, but barely. Billions were gone. Cities were ash. Hope was thin. Now somehow, a single human stood before the most powerful being in the galaxy. The queen finally spoke. Why have you come? Her voice echoed through the hall, calm and cold. Ethan swallowed. His heart was beating fast, but his voice remained steady. I came because my people are tired of being ignored. Murmurs spread through the crowd. You dare speak like this? A guard growled. Ethan took a step forward. Instantly, hundreds of weapons lifted and locked onto him. Red targeting lights covered his chest, his head, his heart. Stop where you are. The guards shouted. Ethan stopped. For a moment, fear hit him like a wave. He was human. He could die here. Very easily. But then he remembered the faces back home. Children sleeping under broken roofs. Parents staring at empty skies. Graves without names. He took another step. Halt! The high priest screamed. The guards moved, and then the queen raised her hand. Everything froze. No one had ever seen her do that before. The queen looked at the human more closely now. Not as a threat, not as an enemy, but as something strange. Come closer, she said. Gasps filled the hall. Ethan hesitated, then walked forward slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. The air itself seemed to push against him. When he stood before the throne, he could feel its power humming like a living thing. The queen towered over him, her eyes glowing faintly with ancient light. You know the punishment for approaching me, she said. Yes, Ethan replied softly. And yet you still came. Yes. Why? Ethan raised his hand, stopping just inches from her. Because someone had to remind you, he said, his voice breaking slightly, what it feels like to be human. The hall held its breath, and Ethan reached out. The moment Ethan's fingers moved forward, the universe seemed to slow down. Guards tightened their grips on their weapons. Muscles tensed. Ancient defense systems hidden within the crystal walls began to wake. A single command, a single thought from the queen, and the human would be erased from existence. But no command came. Ethan's hand trembled slightly. He could feel the power in the air, pressing against his skin, warning him to stop. Every instinct told him to pull back. He was human, weak, fragile, and very easy to kill. Still, he did not stop. His fingertips touched the queen's skin. It was warm. That alone was impossible. The queen gasped sharply, her eyes widening. Light burst from the throne, spreading across the hall like a sudden sunrise. Symbols burned into the air, glowing with colors no one had seen in centuries. The crystal floor shook as if it recognized something long forgotten. The guards cried out in fear. "What is happening?" Someone shouted. The high priest fell to his knees. "The prophecy," he whispered. "It is waking." Inside the queen's mind, everything shattered. For 1,000 years, her thoughts had been clear and controlled, locked behind walls built of duty and power. Now those walls cracked. Memories flooded in, memories she had buried so deeply that she had forgotten they existed. She remembered being young. She remembered standing under real sunlight, not artificial stars. She remembered laughter her own. She remembered hands holding hers, not in fear, but in love. And then she felt something else. Pain, not physical pain, emotional pain. The kind she had sealed away when she became queen. Tears formed in her glowing eyes, falling slowly down her face. The hall watched in stunned silence. No one had ever seen the queen cry. Ethan felt the change immediately. The pressure in the air softened. The cold, distant presence of the queen became warmer, closer. His heart pounded, but he did not pull away. "I'm sorry," he whispered without thinking. The queen looked down at him. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "Why? Does your touch hurt?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Because it's real," he said. "And real things don't disappear just because we ignore them." The symbols in the air shifted, forming ancient words. The high priest read them aloud, his voice shaking. "When the immortal feels the weight of sorrow, when the throne remembers warmth, a fragile hand shall awaken the queen." The prophecy was older than the empire itself. They had always believed it was symbolic. A story meant to teach patience. No one had believed a being as powerful as the queen could be changed by something as small as a touch. Yet here she was. The queen slowly stood, the throne dimmed behind her, its glow fading as if confused by her movement. No queen had stood in centuries. The throne was meant to carry her forever, but she stepped away from it. The guards lowered their weapons without being told. Ethan took a small step back, suddenly unsure. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to listen." The queen studied him carefully. "So much pain in such a small body," she said softly. "Your species should have broken long ago." Ethan met her gaze. "Maybe we did," he replied. "But we kept going anyway." The queen closed her eyes. She saw Earth again, not as data, not as numbers, but as lives. Burning cities. Silent space. A decision she had made long ago, thinking it was logical, necessary, and wrong. When she opened her eyes, the galaxy felt different. The queen reached out, this time. She touched Ethan's hand. The hall froze in shock. Her touch was gentle. And for the first time in 1,000 years, Queen Ashariel felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The grand hall was silent, except for the faint hum of the crystal beneath their feet. The guards and nobles stared, unable to move, their weapons lowered against their will. The queen's hand remained on Ethan's, and in that touch, something impossible had happened, something the galaxy had never seen. The high priest's voice trembled. "The prophecy. It is real. After 1,000 years, it awakens." The queen did not answer. Her eyes, glowing softly with tears, were fixed on the human before her. She had spent centuries building walls around her mind, guarding her thoughts, her feelings, her very soul. Duty had replaced emotion. Power had replaced love. And now, a human, fragile and small, had broken through all of it with a single touch. Ethan felt the weight of her gaze. It was heavy, almost unbearable, but not with anger. It was curiosity, wonder, and something he had not expected: pain. Pain she had hidden for centuries, and now, for the first time, it had room to breathe. Why do you look at me like that?" Ethan asked quietly. The queen inhaled slowly, her multiple eyes glistening. "I remember," she said. "I remember what it means to be alive. I remember what it is to care. I remember humanity." The words echoed through the hall. No one dared interrupt. The guards, trained to kill without thought, lowered their blades entirely. The nobles' mouths hung open. This was not supposed to happen. The queen was untouchable. She was eternal. No species had ever moved her, had ever made her feel. And yet, here she was, trembling as if centuries of stone walls had finally cracked. The high priest stepped forward, hands raised. "Your Majesty, you cannot allow this. This human has violated sacred law. The throne cannot be touched. Enough." The queen's voice rang across the hall, stronger than any weapon. "I said enough." Even the echoing crystal seemed to pause. The high priest froze. The guards faltered. The nobles swallowed nervously. They had never heard the queen raise her voice in such anger or in such clarity. "I do not care for law right now," the queen said. Her eyes softened as she looked at Ethan. "I care about what I feel. And for the first time in 1,000 years, I feel something that matters." Ethan blinked. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to remind me," she finished for him. "To remind me that I am not just a ruler. I am not just a throne. I am alive. And I have forgotten that for far too long." Murmurs swept through the hall. Humans were weak, fragile, worthless in the eyes of the Virelians. And yet this small human had done what no fleet, no weapon, no century of conquest could ever do. He had moved the queen. The high priest fell to his knees, his voice shaking. "But the law, what will the galaxy say?" The queen looked at him with eyes that burned like stars. "The galaxy will learn that strength is not only in weapons. It is in the courage to reach out. It is in the willingness to connect, even when everything tells you to fear." She turned fully to Ethan. "You have shown me something that no one else could. That is your gift." Ethan's throat went dry. "I just wanted to help." "You have done more than help," the queen said softly. "You have reminded me of my own heart. You have reminded me that I am capable of mercy and of hope. And that is more powerful than any army I command." A hush fell over the hall. The guards looked at each other uncertainly. Their queen, the untouchable, the eternal, was no longer untouchable. She was human in her own way, vulnerable, awake, alive. The high priest's hands shook as he rose. "The prophecy. It is true." Only a fragile hand could awaken the queen from her 1,000-year sleep of pride and indifference. The queen finally withdrew her hand. But her eyes stayed on Ethan, for centuries. She had sat on a throne that isolated her from life. Now she realized that isolation had been a prison of her own making. A human had reminded her what it meant to be alive. And for the first time, she understood something no ruler had ever understood. Power without compassion was empty. Strength without empathy was hollow. The galaxy could be ruled with fear, but it could also be changed by something smaller, quieter, and braver: connection. Ethan took a hesitant step back, but he was smiling now, a tiny, trembling smile. "Then, what happens now?" The queen straightened, standing taller than ever, yet somehow softer, warmer. "Now," she said, "we begin again. Together. You have reminded me of what I have forgotten, and I will not forget again." The crystal walls glowed brighter, as if responding to her change of heart. The stars outside seemed to shine a little warmer. The galaxy had watched humanity struggle for survival for centuries, thinking them weak, thinking them small, and yet, here they were, reminding an immortal queen of what truly mattered. The grand hall remained silent, but it was no longer tense. It was alive. Something new had begun. Something that the galaxy would never forget. And all it had taken was the touch of a human hand. The council chambers were tense, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The Grand Council of Virelia, composed of the oldest and most powerful beings in the Empire, had gathered at lightning speed. Every seat was filled with aliens whose eyes glowed like molten metal, whose claws could tear through steel. They had ruled the galaxy for centuries. They had never failed, and now, a human had touched the queen. The air was thick with disbelief. The high priest, trembling with age and fear, began to speak. "Your Majesty, this human has violated the throne. By law and tradition, he must be executed. Your bond with him? It threatens everything we have built." Queen Ashariel rose slowly from her throne. For centuries, she had always obeyed the council, always measured her words, always been the perfect symbol of untouchable authority. But now, standing before the high priest and all the council, she felt something she had not felt in 1,000 years. Anger, and more than that. "Clarity, no," she said. Her voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "I will not allow this council or anyone to judge what is right or wrong in my heart." The council murmured in shock. No one had ever heard her speak like this. She was supposed to be calm, untouchable, immortal, and yet here she was, human in her own way, vulnerable, feeling alive. One counselor stepped forward, claws extended. "You cannot defy the law, Queen. Do you wish to throw away 1,000 years of rule? 1,000 years of order?" The Queen met his gaze. "Order without compassion is meaningless," she said. "I have ruled for 1,000 years, and I have seen countless lives crushed under the weight of my decisions. And now, a human reminds me what it means to care. I will not forget again." Ethan stood quietly at her side, still trembling, but not retreating. He did not fully understand the words, but he felt their power. He felt hope stirring in the hall, hope that even the strongest could change. The council was enraged. "You will ruin the Empire," another shouted. "You will bring chaos to the stars." The Queen's eyes glowed brighter. "No, chaos comes when hearts are frozen. This human has shown me warmth. And warmth is not weakness, it is power. True power." The high priest's hands shook as he turned to the other counselors. "Do you not see? The prophecy. It speaks of a fragile hand awakening the queen. This human fulfills it. He is not a threat. He is the key." A hush fell over the chamber. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. For centuries, they had interpreted the prophecy as a warning of doom, a tale to control the queen and maintain their rule. But now it was clear. The prophecy had never been about destruction. It had been about awakening. Queen Ashariel's gaze returned to Ethan. "Your people may seem weak to us," she said softly, "but they are strong in ways we cannot measure. They endure. They fight. They reach out, even when everything tells them not to. That is a strength my empire has forgotten." Ethan's throat tightened. I didn't come here to teach you," he said. "I just wanted you to see us." The Queen stepped closer to him. "And I have seen you. I have seen humanity, not as data, not as soldiers or colonies, but as people. As fragile, brave, living beings. You remind me that I am alive too." The council erupted in anger again, but the Queen raised her hand. Silence fell instantly. She was no longer just a figurehead. She was no longer untouchable in law alone, she was untouchable in conviction. "I will not have my actions dictated by fear," she said. "I will not let my empire forget what it means to feel. And I will not allow anyone to harm this human." who has done what no fleet or army could ever do. He has reminded me that life is worth more than power. The guards, who had once prepared to kill Ethan on command, lowered their weapons fully. The nobles, some still shaking with disbelief, saw the change in their ruler. For the first time, the queen was choosing heart over tradition, mercy over fear, connection over conquest. The high priest whispered, almost to himself, "The prophecy is fulfilled. The galaxy will never be the same." Ethan looked around the chamber. For centuries, the Virelian Empire had ruled with strength. But here, in this moment, he realized that something far greater than weapons and fleets had entered the galaxy. Hope. And that hope had a human heart. Queen Ashariel turned to the council one last time. "We begin a new era," she declared. "Not ruled by fear. Not by law alone. But by understanding, and yes, even by touch, by connection, and by courage." A silence followed that was heavier than any battle, deeper than any council debate. The empire itself seemed to hold its breath, knowing that the galaxy had changed forever, and it had. All because one human dared to reach out. The Grand Hall had never been so quiet, yet so alive. The Queen's words still echoed in every corner, in every heart. Guards lowered their weapons. Nobles whispered among themselves. And in the center, Ethan stood, trembling but proud. The human who had changed the course of a 1,000-year-old empire with nothing but courage and a single touch. Queen Ashariel turned fully toward him. "You have done what no weapon, no army, and no fleet could ever do," she said. "You reminded me that power alone is empty. That strength without compassion is meaningless. That life is what truly matters." Ethan's throat tightened. I didn't mean to." "You did not mean to do anything to be yourself," the Queen interrupted gently. "And that was enough. That is more than enough." The high priest, still kneeling, whispered, She actually sees humanity as equals?" "Not equals," the Queen said quietly. "Something far more important. Humans are small, fragile. Yet they endure. They feel, even when it hurts. They fight, even when they could flee. They reach out, even when no one else will. That is their greatest weapon, and that weapon has awakened me." The council sat in stunned silence. No one had ever heard a ruler speak like this. For centuries, they had interpreted weakness as inferiority. Now, they realized the truth. Courage and compassion were stronger than fleets of warships. Queen Ashariel raised her hand, commanding attention once more. "Send ships to Earth," she declared. "Send aid, protection, guidance. Humanity has suffered too long while we watched. No longer. We will act not as rulers imposing will, but as allies extending hands." The guards blinked. This was unheard of. The Empire did not aid the weak. The Empire ruled, demanded obedience, enforced power. And yet, here was their queen, ordering help, forgiveness, and protection. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. They will survive?" He whispered. "They will," the Queen said. "And they will remember that someone, somewhere, believed in them when the stars themselves ignored them." Across the galaxy, transmission beams hummed to life. Ships prepared to depart from the Virelian armadas, not for war, but for mercy. Supplies, technology, medicine, and protectors were sent to humanity. The news spread like wildfire. Every human, from crowded cities to isolated colonies, heard the story. A human had touched the Queen, and she had remembered. On Earth, people cried when the first aid ships arrived. Children ran into the streets, staring at the shining vessels above. Parents fell to their knees, clutching one another in disbelief. For the first time in centuries, humanity felt the gaze of the stars, watching them not as weaklings, but as survivors, as beings worth protecting. Ethan watched from the deck of one of the first ships. He was small, unarmed, tired, and human, but he had changed the galaxy. He looked at Queen Ashariel, standing tall among her guards, her silver crown glinting in the light of distant suns. She no longer seemed untouchable, yet somehow she was stronger than ever. Strength, he realized, was not just in power or command, it was in feeling, in caring, in reaching out. The Queen turned her many eyes toward him. "You have done more than survive, Ethan Walker," she said softly. "You have reminded the galaxy of something they forgot long ago, that even the smallest being, with the simplest touch, can change the course of history." Ethan swallowed, shaking his head. I just wanted someone to see us." "Then you succeeded," the Queen replied. "More than anyone ever could have imagined." The counselors, who had once plotted his death, now watched with unease and admiration. The human, whom they had considered fragile and irrelevant, had altered the empire itself. He had reminded their queen of warmth. He had reminded the stars of humanity's courage. The Queen walked among the council, her presence radiant, yet gentle. "Power is nothing without empathy," she said. "Strength without compassion is meaningless. The galaxy has been ruled by fear for too long. Let it now be ruled, at least in part, by connection, understanding, and hope." Ethan looked out at the stars, feeling small, yet infinite. He had crossed impossible distances. He had faced fear unimaginable to his species. And yet, here he was alive, recognized, valued. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. In that moment, something inside him shifted. Humanity had survived disasters, wars, and the neglect of the stars. But now they had allies, protection, and something far greater, acknowledgement. The Virelians, once distant and untouchable, had learned to care. And if they could care, perhaps the galaxy itself could change. The Queen placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Go home," she said. "Your people await, and they will find hope where there was once only despair." Ethan nodded, tears falling freely. He realized that no weapon, no fleet, no empire could have done what he had done with just one human touch. He had reminded a god to feel, reminded a queen to remember. And in doing so, he had reminded the stars that humanity was not just a species to be counted, but a force to be reckoned with. And somewhere, deep in the cosmos, the galaxy shifted. 1,000-year-old empire had softened, not with fear, not with power, but with understanding. And humanity, fragile and small, had given it the first spark. The news spread faster than light. Across star systems and colonies, beings whispered the impossible. The human touched the Queen. The prophecy is fulfilled. Planets that had once feared Virelia now watched closely. What did it mean for the strongest empire in the galaxy to be moved by a single human? What did it mean for humanity itself, a species so small, so fragile, yet so brave? Ethan returned to Earth aboard a Virelian vessel, silent and exhausted. He had crossed impossible distances, faced unimaginable threats, and changed the course of a 1,000-year-old empire. And yet, he felt small, ordinary, fragile, just a human. But the people he saw waiting below, children with dirt on their faces, parents clutching one another in relief, soldiers staring at the sky in disbelief, made him realize something profound. He was no longer ordinary. Humanity had survived centuries of neglect, disasters, and wars. And now, the galaxy had taken notice. The Queen's decree had arrived first. Ships filled with medicine, food, and protection descended toward Earth. Virelian engineers worked alongside human scientists. Technology that had seemed untouchable for centuries was shared freely. The empire that had once turned its gaze away from a struggling planet now embraced it as an ally. Ethan walked among the people, their eyes shining with hope. Children ran toward the sky, pointing at the ships. Parents wept openly, holding hands with neighbors they had never spoken to before. Humanity had survived, but it was the first time in centuries that survival felt like victory. Yet Ethan knew it was not just the Queen's decision. It was the recognition of something deeper. Humans, fragile and fleeting, had something no empire could fully measure: courage, compassion, and the will to reach out, even when everything told them not to. That was the power that had changed the galaxy. In the Virelian palace, Queen Ashariel watched the transmissions from Earth. She had spent centuries ruling with cold logic. She had calculated every move, every war, every alliance. And she had been effective, ruthless, untouchable. But she had been wrong. Single human hand had reminded her that life was not about control or conquest. Life was about connection. Life was about courage. Life was about hope. She had sent aid to Earth, but it was not just about resources. It was about recognition. It was about showing a species that they mattered, that they were seen, that they were alive. Other species of the galaxy began to take note. If a human could touch a queen and awaken her heart, what else could they do? What other impossible feats might humanity accomplish? The fragile species, long underestimated, had changed not just one empire, but the perception of the entire galaxy. Ethan watched children playing under the shade of trees while Virelian drones distributed medicine. He watched soldiers teaching humans to use alien equipment for protection. And he realized something he had not understood before. Humanity's greatest strength was not in weapons or numbers, but in their hearts. Somewhere, deep in the cosmos, the stars seemed to shine brighter. Not because of ships or technology, but because hope had returned. A species that had lived in fear of the universe now knew that someone, somewhere, believed in them. The Queen's voice came through the communication channel, soft but commanding. "Ethan Walker," she said, "you have reminded me of what I lost. I will not forget again. And the galaxy will not forget humanity. You have changed more than empires. You have changed hearts." Ethan smiled faintly, exhausted but relieved. I only did what anyone would do," he said. "No," the Queen replied. "Most would have looked away. Most would have followed fear. But you reached out when the stars told you not to. And that is what makes humans extraordinary." The people around Ethan cheered as the Virelian ships landed in their cities, distributing aid, teaching, and helping. It was the first step in a new era. The humans were no longer alone. They had allies among the stars, and the galaxy itself had shifted. It had shifted not with war, not with conquest, not with power, but with understanding, with connection, with courage. Ethan looked at the horizon, the sun rising over a recovering city. He thought of the Queen, standing alone on her throne, changed forever by something he had done without knowing it would matter. A hand, a touch, a gesture of trust in humanity had done what no fleet, no weapon, no empire could, for the first time in centuries. Humans and aliens alike felt something that transcended politics, power, and fear: hope. And the galaxy, vast and infinite, would never be the same again. And somewhere deep in the stars, Queen Ashariel smiled. She had remembered what it meant to be alive. And she would never forget. Years passed, yet the memory of that day in the Grand Hall never faded for the Queen, for Ethan, or for the galaxy. The empire had changed, slowly but surely. Alliances once built on fear had shifted to understanding. Wars were fewer. The stars felt warmer. And humanity, once ignored and underestimated, walked among the galaxies as equals, still fragile, still mortal, but now recognized and valued. Ethan had returned to Earth, not as a hero in armor, not as a conqueror, but as a simple man who had dared to reach out. Children ran to him in the streets, their eyes wide with wonder. Scientists and soldiers alike looked to him with respect, knowing that his courage had shifted the balance of power across the stars. And yet, he often wondered if he truly deserved the admiration. He had only done what any human would do. He had simply cared. On Virelia, Queen Ashariel often stood alone in her throne room, her eyes reflecting the glow of the crystal walls. The empire was still vast, still powerful, but she ruled differently now. She listened more. She judged less. She remembered that every decision, every law, every fleet affected lives, not numbers, not systems, not trophies, but living beings. One day, a young Virelian counselor approached her. His claws were still trembling from nerves, his glowing eyes wide with curiosity. "Your Majesty," he asked, "why did you stop your guards that day? Why did you not punish the human for touching you?" The queen smiled softly, a rare expression that no one in the empire had ever seen. "Because when he touched me, I felt something I had not felt in 1,000 years, she said. Her voice was quiet but carried across the chamber like a ripple in water. "I felt life. I felt warmth. I felt humanity." The counselor blinked. "Humanity?"